Does your past define you, or the DNA that made you? Thank you for clicking on this video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today we are going to be talking about the Yosemite Park killer. Now, the beautiful, serene landscape of the Yosemite National Park was about to turn into a horror set. Except this was real life. By the way, I'm doing Suspect Summer all summer long, so if you want to see more content like this, please support me by thumbsing up and subscribing and leave me some comments down below. Now let's get back to the story. So the Yosemite National Park in California's Sierra Nevada in 1999 had loads of tourists coming to see the beauty, but a lot of hikers would get lost along the way and need help getting back. The employees all over the park would have to go out, find them, and then lead them back to where they needed to be. It was just a routine, usually easy job to do. But it was the morning of July 22nd, and the employees at the park were all being paged for a search. It was the height of tourist season, and the Yosemite Village was basically filled with the employees either taking a break or just roaming around doing work, and they were all kind of being paged at the same time. Dr. Desmond Kidd was the park's medical expert, the doctor there, and he was just gotten to the Yosemite Village when he was paged to help with the search as well. He had been working a 24-hour shift before then. He had just gotten off of it and was about to go home when he was paged, but he had been there for years, and he noticed something was strange because they had said that there were law enforcement implications. He knew the next step would be for everyone to head out in four-wheel drive vehicles and turned left to an unmarked road through the trees, which was basically like a housing area for the employees and really anyone who wanted to stay there, but was mostly employees. 30 cabins in the area continued to look eerie since about 1990, when there was a forest fire that blackened the pine trees and kind of were left that way and kind of remained skeletal and never really regained the beauty that it had before. But it looked even creepier that day when a green secluded cabin had crime scene tape around the cabin. There was also a white abandoned truck in the driveway. The doctor soon learned that the house belonged to a 26-year-old named Joie Ruth Armstrong, who was a naturalist at the Yosemite Institute nearby, which basically means she was an expert at natural history. Her boyfriend, who lived in this cabin with her, was also a naturalist, and they also had another woman roommate, but those two were out of town at the time and just Joie was staying at the cabin. Her friends had said she was strawberry blonde, she was beautiful, full of joy, full of life, and just amazing to be around, and they wanted to be around her that weekend. They had actually all planned a trip in Salisto, California, which was just a little whiles away, and she was supposed to be headed their way, but she never got there. Joie never showed up to hang out with her friends, and that's when they called the police and the search began of her home. The first thing they noticed was that the luggage was still in the back of her truck. But Joie Armstrong was nowhere to be found, and why didn't she take her luggage if she left, and what vehicle did she take? This was not looking good for Joie. They knew they had to begin the search quickly because she was not the first person to go missing that year, and those cases did not end well. You see, 5 months earlier in February, 3 female tourists named Carrie Sund, her daughter Julie Sund, and an Argentina exchange student named Silvina Palacio all went missing. They were staying at Cedar Lodge, which was a hotel near Yosemite Park's entrance, when they completely vanished. Evidence was found that they were abducted, and this was one of the biggest searches in the Sierra Nevada, with hundreds of police officers, helicopters, dogs, and their bodies were found a month later, March 19th, at 100 miles away from the hotel in Carol's Pontiac rental car. They were found in the trunk. There were only 2 bodies found. So where was the third? The 2 bodies couldn't be even identified at first because they were burned so badly, but dental records finally identified them as Carol Sund and Silvina Palacio. So where was Julie? A note was sent to the police a little while later with the words, "We had fun with this one," written on top, and a map which supposedly led to Julie's body. Police instantly headed out to go check that area, and sure enough, Julie's body was found with her throat slit. Police interviewed employees of the Cedar Lodge Hotel. Nobody really fit the suspect that they were looking for, and nobody was too suspicious. They actually had 2 ex-convicts in custody for it because they had gotten in trouble just a few days after they went missing. Their names were Michael Larwick and Eugene Dykes, and the FBI said that they had fibers from the scene which linked them to the murders. The case was still ongoing when Joie Anderson disappeared 4 months later. Now they were searching and praying for Joie to be found and it not turn out like the other 3 women did. The searchers immediately started. They split up into 5 groups and they went separate ways to search the woods around her cabin. The doctor went with his group in the woods along Crane Creek, and after a few minutes they stopped because they began to see footprints and crunched leaves that could possibly have been from somebody running through or being chased through the woods. Then one of the rangers in the group startled the doctor by pointing down frantically and saying, "What is that?" The ranger saw something metallic. Upon closer look, it looked to be a key ring glistening in the sun. But what was beside it was far more important. It was a woman's body in a white shirt and blue jeans. The doctor leaned in closer to get a better look and nearly gagged. He ran back to the top ranger and he said, "We have an 1144, which is police code for dead body." But what he added next was the worst part. He said, "And she's been decapitated." 4 bodies now in 1 year in this area, and the last homicide in the Yosemite National Park was a husband who had thrown his wife off a cliff to get her insurance policy. They had thought that they had caught the guys who murdered the first 3, but now with so many connections to this last murder, they weren't sure that they had the guys at all because they were in custody at the time of Joie's murder. They had no idea where else to go from here, but then they got a tip called in that said that somebody had seen a blue and white 1979 International Scout parked near Joie's house the night she would have been murdered. Police instantly issued a lookout for everybody to try to find this car and try to bring the suspect, who was the owner of the car, in, and it worked. By that afternoon, 2 officers spotted it on the side of California 140 highway, the Merced River County, and it was only about 12 miles from the actual Yosemite entrance, and so they stopped and they walked up to see a man sunbathing near a cabin. He had a joint and he was completely in the nude. When they walked up and asked his name, he said it pretty calmly, Cary Stayner. They already knew that because they had interviewed him with the 3 other murders because he was one of the employees at Cedar Lodge. At the time, he didn't have a criminal record really, and he didn't seem suspicious, so they let him go. But now his car was being linked to a completely different murder. It was being linked to those. They took photographs of his tire tracks and compared them to the ones at the scene, and they came back as a match. So 2 days later, they went out searching for him again. They found Cary Stayner eating lunch at the nudist resort called Laguna del Sol. When they picked him up, they put him in the backseat of their car, and on the way to the station, Cary started saying Billy Jack quotes from the movie. This was very strange to the FBI agent because when they had first questioned him about the 3 murders because he was an employee at the hotel, that exact FBI agent had actually asked him if he had ever seen Billy Jack because he looked just like the main character. Cary had said no, and now suddenly he was quoting it like he had known the movie forever. They took Cary to the Sacramento Police Department and booked him on the suspicion of murder of Joie Armstrong. It didn't take him much to confess, and he also said that he had been the one to murder the other 3 women too, and that day he was actually going to kill his girlfriend and his girlfriend's daughter, but decided to go with the 3 women instead. He also added that he had fantasized about killing since he was a little kid and that his compulsion just couldn't be stopped. He said when he was 7, he went to the grocery store with his mom and he had a sudden urgency to open fire on the cashiers there. It's thought that he had slipped through the cracks for so long because who would think that the brother of a boy who was abducted would become a serial killer? I'm sure Steven Stayner didn't. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll leave the video link down below. After doing a video on the abduction of Steven Stayner, I had so many requests to do his brother Cary, his brother who turned out to be a serial killer. Cary was 11 when Steven was abducted and 18 when he came home. He was 38 when he murdered the 4 women and went into grave detail about how he did it as well. When the 3 girls checked into the Cedar Lodge Hotel, he was in the lounge when he saw them, and that evening he decided that he was going to murder them. So he went to room 509, knocked on the door, and came in insisting that he needed to change a leak in the bathroom. He had a toolbox filled with a knife, rope, gun, and duct tape. Carol let him in reluctantly after fighting for a while, and eventually when he came in, he pointed a gun at her. He went and tied up both the girls, put them in the bathroom, and then he strangled and killed Carol Sund. Sylvania was sobbing by the time he came back in, and he took her next and did the same thing to her. He left Julie in the bathroom for a really long time, and when he came back for her, he took her and put her in the car. For that, he had tortured and raped her for hours, which he denied profusely before anyone had ever asked him. He just continued to say, "I didn't do anything to Julie. I didn't sexually assault her," and he very obviously did. He dumped her body in the woods and then put Carol and Sylvania in the trunk and left, abandoning that car. He actually went back a few days later to set the Pontiac on fire and also retrieve Carol's wallet to ditch it in the middle of the road somewhere completely different to throw the police off. He was also the one to send the note in about where Julie's body could be found. With Joie Armstrong's murder, he had actually pulled up while she was putting stuff in the truck and getting ready to leave. He tried to ask her about the obsession that he had had with Bigfoot. She was very friendly to him, and when he found out that she was alone in the house, that is when he decided to murder her. He pointed a gun at her, forced her back into the cabin, and that is when he duct taped her mouth, bound her, and took her to his car. As they drove though, Joie didn't just go willingly. She actually leapt out the door and tried to run as fast as she could, but unfortunately she couldn't get away, and that is when Carrie went up to her with a knife and began to slit her throat enough that it decapitated her. His car actually broke down after that, after he got rid of the body, and he had to ask a ranger for a ride back home. The ranger was questioned about that and said that he seemed calm and collected and nothing seemed off about him at all. Just so incredibly creepy. Carrie claimed that he was neglected after Stephen's abduction because everybody just wanted to find Stephen and didn't care about him. When Stephen came home, he said it was even worse because now the attention was still on him and he was home anyways, so he never got attention. 9 years prior to these murders, Carrie's uncle Jesse was actually murdered by a gunshot wound to the chest. Carrie was questioned because he was living there at the time, but he had an alibi that he was at work when he was shot, and he also said that he saw someone lurking around their house prior to him being murdered. But the killer was never found, and that case is still unsolved. 3 years before the murders, Carrie actually had a public breakdown in 1996 at his Merced Mirror and Glass company he was working at. He slammed his fist into wood. It was bleeding profusely, and when a coworker came to see if he was okay, he said that he wanted to drive his truck into the company building and kill everyone inside. And then he wanted to torch the place. So then his boss went and took him to a psychiatric hospital to get help, where he did for a little bit. It was voluntary though, and so he could get out, but he didn't go back to that job or to that place. He decided to head to the Sierra Nevada, where these 4 women would eventually be killed by him. He pled guilty to the murder of Joie Armstrong and got a life sentence, but he tried to plead insanity with the other 3 murders. In July, a few weeks after the arrest, the trial for the 3 murders was about to begin. He was entering a plea of not guilty because he wanted room for an insanity defense if he needed it. That was because he was hoping to get 2nd-degree murder instead of the death penalty, which he was looking at. He claimed that his past trauma with his brother and his sexual abuse from his uncle were all a part of why he did this, as well as the severe OCD that he had. A doctor came in to confirm that he had mild autism, OCD, and paraphilia, which he confirmed when he asked for child pornography in return for a confession. But the jury didn't buy his insanity, and neither did the judge, and he was convicted of 3 counts of 1st-degree murder. This was August 26, 2002, and Carrie was 41 years old at the time. He still sits on death row at San Quentin Penitentiary in California, and before all of this, before he even confessed and was thought to be a suspect, his sisters had actually talked about the possibility of him being the Yosemite Park killer. They reopened the case of his uncle and also several unsolved murders in the area because they said it's pretty unlikely that a serial killer would start with killing 3 women at one time. So he insisted that that was the first time he ever murdered. It's just very strange to go from nothing to 3 all of a sudden like that. It's also thought that possibly his uncle knew about what he was doing. Maybe he was murdering before his uncle. His uncle found out and died because of the secret he knew. And the FBI also aren't convinced that he acted alone either. But either way, it seems like this was Carrie's way of getting the attention that his brother got but in a completely wrong way. This was the attention he thought he deserved, but I don't think he realized that their reputations were two completely different things. In the spotlight, in the eye of the public, Stephen was a hero. The whole video that I filmed of him, he is such a strong, amazing person. And in the public eye, Carrie is a monster and will always be. I wonder if he cares. It's been implied that this was all due to Stephen Stayner's abduction, disappearance, and the past trauma that Carrie had to go through with all that, but Carrie has really tried to prove and make sure it's known that he had these dark thoughts and intentions and plans far before Stephen was even gone. It seems like his mind was twisted far before that, but nobody really noticed because they were so focused on Stephen. Do you think the 3 women at Cedar Lodge were Carrie's first kill? Or do you think that there's much more to this story and much more to his list of victims? Do you also think that he was working alone? Because he did write, we had fun with this one on Julie's note. I don't know, you guys let me know down below what you think, but I highly doubt he was so professional and planned in his murders of the 3 women. If he wouldn't have killed Joie Armstrong, I don't think he would have been caught for the first 3. I just think he couldn't stop himself. I don't know. Could he have just been that much of an evil genius in his first kill, or had he been practicing before that? I want to remind you with such dark content that you are powerful enough to either become the darkness or to brighten it. I love you, and I'll let you go. Bye. Some people are just evil from birth, but that's something we all refuse to unearth.